Hey everybody, it's Mr. Hussey again with the Joy of Music School. Thanks for joining us for our 10th lesson in our series in understanding the symbols we use in music. For today's lesson, we're going to continue working on bringing together many of the ideas that we've been working on in our previous lessons and helping you to try to write some pitched musical phrases. Let's get started for the day. So as we get started today, let's remember a couple ideas that will help us as we continue to draw and write our different musical phrases. So first of all, we need to make sure that we remember the note and the rest symbols that we've been using to write our music. We've been using notes like whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, and eighth notes when we've wanted to create sound in our music. But we also need to remember that we can use our rest symbols in our music when we write it, when we want to make sure that there is silence. And we use these different symbols to create different lengths of sound. If I want sounds to hold out for 4 long beats, then I want to make sure that I write my whole notes in when I'm writing my music. If I want to create sounds that are going to be held out for only 2 beats, then that would mean that I'd want to use a half note. If I want to write music that has beats that are only going to be 1 beat at a time, then we know that we would use our quarter notes. And if we want to start getting into some of those faster beats, we would start using our eighth note because each eighth note is only going to be a half beat. So we've taken those different note symbols and we've started to place those musical note and rest symbols onto our musical staff lines. More specifically, we've started to place those musical note symbols onto our treble clef. And all that means is that we're starting to write music that sounds a little bit higher, kind of like where our voice is when we talk. But what we need to remember about placing our musical note symbols on the treble clef is by placing our notes on different lines and in different spaces of the treble clef, it means that we're supposed to make different types of musical sounds, either high sounds or low sounds, depending on where that musical note symbol is placed on the treble clef lines. Now, something else that we want to make sure that you all remember, beyond just these note symbols, how long they're going to be counted for, and where to place those different note symbols to get different sounds or pitches on the treble clef, we've also talked about a couple ideas revolving around essentially making sure that we're putting the right number of beats in each little section of music or measure that we're writing. Remember, we've talked about having time signatures that can either be 2/4, 3/4, or 4/4. Each of these time signatures is representing that a quarter note will receive 1 beat, but a 2/4 time signature means that there's only 2 beats in each little section or measure of music that we would write. A 3/4 time signature would be telling us that there would be 3 beats in each of the musical measures that we would write. And for the music that you've been trying to write, we're using a 4/4 time signature, which is telling us that the music we write should have 4 beats in each of the measures that we're trying to write in our music. Now, if we can remember those ideas, again, the note symbols that we want to use and the number of beats that those symbols are going to represent, if we can place those musical note symbols on our treble clef to represent different pitches or high sounds and low sounds, and if we can remember our time signatures representing how many beats in each little section of music that we're going to try to write, then folks, we're well on our way to starting to be able to write pitched musical phrases. Now let's look at an example that some of you may have tried from our last lesson, where we were starting to write some of these pitched musical phrases. A tune that is probably very familiar to many of us is the song called Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Now, last week, many of you tried an activity where we took these musical pitches, and remember, we name our musical pitches by using single letters of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And what we did is we provided for you the musical pitches that represent the song Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And what we asked you all to do is could you take these musical pitches and start to place them onto the treble clef and start to write the actual music for Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Now, a couple things that we wanted for you to think about as you were starting to write your music, given the pitches that you see right here on the screen, is that we needed to know what the length or the number of counts or beats each of these musical pitches or letters would represent when we wrote our music. So if we think about how the song Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star goes, let's see if we can kind of figure out exactly how many beats each of these little letters needs to be. Think about it like this. If I sing the song, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, each of those notes, G, G, D, D, E, and E, each one was the same amount of beats. And it seems as if each of the parts of the words that we were singing matched up to one beat for each of the letters that we see in the song. But when we look at the end of that lyric or the words that we see for the first line, we should notice that we held out the word star. Listen to it again. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. We held that word star out for a little bit longer than we did our other letters that represent the other parts of the words in the song. And we gave you all a little hint and said that when you see a letter and a little dash behind it, that would represent a half note. So if a letter plus a little hash represents a half note, and that's going to be 2 beats, then maybe we should think about each of our letters here in the song Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Maybe those letters that do not have a little dash after them, maybe those are going to be representing one musical beat. And if we think about one musical beat, what musical note symbol represents one beat? Folks, we said that a quarter note represents one beat. So when we write our music for Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, we should notice that each of these letters that we see should be drawn as a quarter note. So we need to take these pitches, draw them as quarter notes, and then make sure that we put them on the correct lines and the correct spaces of the treble clef. Wherever we see a letter followed by a little dash, we know that we're going to hold that out longer than one beat or a quarter note. So a letter that we see that has a dash that follows it, we know that that's going to represent 2 beats. And we know what note symbol represents 2 beats in our music. That would be a half note. So if I again look at this first line of music that I see here for Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, I should see that I have quarter note on G, quarter note on G, quarter note on D, quarter note on D, quarter note on E, quarter note on E, and then for our D with the little dash, we're going to put a half note on the D where that is on our treble clef. So if we look at the rest of our music for Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, we see a familiar pattern. Each of our letters is going to represent a quarter note. So where you see a single letter, that tells you that you're going to place a quarter note on the appropriate line or space in the treble clef to represent that lyric of the song or the words that you hear in the song. Each letter that has a little dash after it, that tells us that that note symbol is going to be a half note for that particular pitch. So seeing the music like this is one thing, but let's look and see if we actually place all of our notes onto our treble clef, making sure where we had our quarter notes and where we had our half notes. Let's see what that might look like. So if we took those notes and we placed them on the treble clef, here's what it should look like. Whoa! Is that what yours looked like when you tried to do this in our lesson last week? Take a look for me. As you can see, here's our G as a quarter note and our G as a quarter note. How do we know those first 2 notes for twinkle are going to be G's? because our music told us so. And we know that a G on the treble clef needs to be placed on that second line. The D's that followed our two G's, they're going to be placed on the 1, 2, 3, fourth line at the top. Our E's for the word little, they're going to be placed in the very top space, the 1, 2, 3, fourth space that we see right there. And then remember how we had that D with a little dash after it? We said that that was going to be our half note, right? And we were going to make sure we held that out for two beats. So folks, the first line of music that we were just looking at for Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, here's what the first line looks like if we write it in our music. Now, something else that we want to think about here is look at our time signature that we're using right here. We're using a 4/4 time signature. That lets us know that our quarter note is one beat and that each of our little sections of music should have 4 beats in it. Let's look and see if they do have 4 beats. Remember that a quarter note is worth 1 beat. How many quarter notes do you see in the first section of music or first measure of music that we have right here? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's exactly what we want to have, 4 beats in each measure. Take a look at our second measure right here. 1, 2, because each quarter note is 1 beat, but our half note here is already 2 beats all by itself because we're going to hold out that word star for 2 beats. So folks, 1, 2 plus 2 is 4. So we're still having 4 beats in each of our musical measures that we see there. Now, if we took all the other lines from our song Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and we'd place them onto our treble clef, here's what the entire song should have looked like when you wrote it down on your musical staff lines. Now, something that I want to make sure that you understand is when we're looking at this music that you see on the screen, you may see these little letters above the treble clef. Those little letters are not necessarily telling you the pitch of the note below it. Those letters are actually telling us some chords or some other notes that we could play along as we play the notes that you see that you've written on the treble clef. So it's giving us just a little bit more information if we wanted to play some more musical notes that went along with what we've already written for our song, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So folks, how did you do when you tried to write Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star last week? Did it look something like that? I bet it did. And if you made a few mistakes when you were trying to write your song, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, it's okay. This is a very, very tough skill when we're starting to write music. And it takes time and practice, and we've just got to keep working at it to get better and better with it. So now let's talk a little bit about the activities that go along for this lesson that you're going to be doing for this week. So the activities that we have for this lesson are going to be very similar to what you saw with the activities for our previous lesson in lesson number 9. The difference is going to be that with the activities that we've prepared for you, we're going to provide you some instructions to help guide what you should be writing down on your musical staff lines in the treble clef. So you may see that there are instructions that tell you to draw a treble clef sign. You may see instructions that ask you to make sure that you write down a correct time signature that tells us how many beats are going to be in each section or measure of music that you're writing. And then you're going to see some information that may tell you what note symbols to use or what pitches you may need to use to try to write some of the different musical phrases that we've provided for you. Again, the skill that we're working on when we start to write music is very tough, and we're just scratching the surface with being able to write our music. But we're hoping that this is a start for you to begin to start writing some of your own music. And we've made sure to provide you some musical staff lines so that you can try to write some of your own music as you start to get more comfortable and confident in writing your musical pitched phrases. Alrighty, everybody, we're about out of time for today's lesson. We're so happy that you were able to join us for our musical series in understanding how to use our note and rest symbols. And we're so happy that you've worked so hard in trying to understand how to be able to use these symbols and all the information that we've used and learned over our videos in this series to try to write and draw some of your own music. Thanks again for working so hard for us, and we hope to see you all again very, very soon. Bye-bye.